Memory is not just something your brain has, it's something your whole being quietly does, all the time. Sometimes it's gentle, like the way you recall the smell of rain on a summer evening. Other times it's vivid and unshakable, like the moment you first heard your favorite song. In every heartbeat, your mind is gathering fragments of sights, sounds, feelings, stitching them together into something you can carry forward. Yet memory is not a perfect recording. It is alive, changing, reshaping itself with each recall, sometimes without you even noticing. Tonight we'll wander softly through this hidden world, from the first spark of a memory's birth to the invisible currents that decide which ones will stay and which will fade away. We'll step into the tiny electrical storms in your brain, visit the chemistry that makes remembering possible, and uncover why some moments feel like they are etched in gold. Let's begin. The quiet spark that begins every memory. Every memory begins with a moment so small you might miss it, a spark barely brighter than the flicker of a candle in the wind. It could be the sight of a friend's smile, the crunch of gravel under your shoes, or the sudden warmth of sunlight on your skin. Your senses, always alert in the background, collect these fragments without asking permission. In that instant, your brain decides, almost instinctively, whether this spark is worth keeping. Most pass by unnoticed, lost in the endless stream of living, but some, for reasons you might never guess, become seeds. It's strange to think that right now, as you listen, a spark is already forming. Maybe it's in the tone of this voice, or a thought you didn't expect to have. This spark doesn't yet feel like a memory. It's too new, too fragile. And yet inside your brain, something remarkable is happening. Cells are reaching out to each other, building tiny bridges of possibility. You don't see it, but the architecture of recall is already under construction. What's remarkable is how unremarkable it feels in the moment. You rarely notice the exact second a memory begins. It doesn't announce itself, and it doesn't ask for space in your mind. Like a note slipped into your pocket, it hides quietly until you find it later. The very best memories often start in this quiet way, not as grand events, but as little whispers of time. And here's the curious part. This spark, once born, is already in danger. Without the right attention, it will vanish. Without the right emotional weight, it will dissolve before you ever realize it existed. Your brain must decide if this tiny flame is worth shielding from the winds of forgetfulness. And that decision happens in milliseconds. This is where our journey into memory truly begins, at the fragile edge where a moment either becomes part of you or fades into the silence of the unseen. How the brain turns moments into patterns. The brain does not store memories as photographs. It doesn't take a neat frozen picture of reality. Instead, it works like a painter layering brush strokes, bits of sound, colour, smell, texture, all swirling together. Each spark from your senses becomes part of a larger pattern, a tapestry of associations. This is why the smell of coffee can make you remember a rainy morning from years ago. Inside, neurons fire in synchronized rhythms, lighting up pathways you've used before. These patterns are your brain's way of connecting new information to old experiences. That's why learning something is easier if it reminds you of something you already know. The brain loves shortcuts, and every new memory is placed in context, tucked among familiar patterns for safekeeping. Patterns aren't just for efficiency, they're for meaning. When the brain organizes moments into recognizable sequences, it's giving you a way to understand life itself. Without this, every second would feel random, disconnected. By turning moments into patterns, your brain transforms chaos into a story. And yet, patterns can be misleading. Sometimes your brain connects things that don't truly belong together, creating false links. This is why a single song might remind you of two entirely different events, because your brain stored them in a similar pattern space. In this way, memory is both a guide and a trickster. As you drift deeper into this understanding, you start to realize every memory you hold is not a single thing, it's a web. And every time you touch it, the web changes. The hidden role of attention in shaping recall: attention is the gatekeeper of memory. Without it, moments slip past like water through open hands. This is why you can sit through an entire conversation and later realize you remember almost nothing. Your attention was elsewhere, your gate was unguarded. When you focus, the brain releases chemicals that strengthen the connections between neurons. This marking process tells your brain, this is important, keep it. That's why moments of deep presence, looking into someone's eyes, feeling the weight of a choice, tend to stay with you. But attention is fragile. Distractions pull it away, scattering the energy needed to cement a memory. Even small interruptions can fracture the recording process. Imagine trying to take a photograph while the camera shakes. You still get an image, but it's blurred. This is why multitasking often leaves you with shallow memories. You touched many things but never fully held them. The brain's memory system thrives on depth, not speed. The deeper your attention, the stronger the imprint. And yet, there's a twist. Sometimes the things you remember most are those that grab your attention without warning. The flash of lightning, the sudden laugh in a quiet room, the unexpected word that makes you pause. Tiny electrical storms in the hippocampus. Deep in the brain, a small seahorse-shaped structure called the hippocampus acts as a master archivist. When a moment matters enough to you, it sends out tiny electrical storms, bursts of activity that weave the sensory threads into a first draft of memory. These storms are brief but powerful. In seconds, they transform fleeting signals into something more stable. It's like quickly sketching an outline before the details fade. Without this, every moment would dissolve before it even had a chance to become part of your life. The hippocampus doesn't work alone. It collaborates with surrounding regions, each adding its own texture. Visual areas add imagery, auditory regions add sound, and the emotional centers add tone and weight. Together, they create a living map of the moment. Damage to the hippocampus can erase the ability to form new memories, leaving a person trapped in a loop of the present. Yet, even in healthy brains, these electrical storms are selective. They don't record everything. They choose, filter, prioritize. And perhaps that's the mystery. Not that we forget so much, but that we remember at all. Why smell can unlock the past so vividly. Smell is the quiet time traveler of memory. Unlike sight or sound, which pass through multiple processing steps, scent goes almost directly to the brain's memory centers. This is why a single whiff of perfume or the earthy scent of rain can transport you years into the past in an instant. The olfactory bulb, which processes smell, sits just a short connection away from the hippocampus and amygdala, the memory and emotion hubs. This shortcut gives scent a unique power. It binds memory and feeling so tightly that they become inseparable. You've probably felt it, catching a smell and feeling an emotion rise before you even know why. That's because the brain isn't recalling a smell alone. It's recalling the entire scene, the colors, the voices, the light, the mood. In some ways, scent is less about accuracy and more about immersion. It doesn't politely knock, it swings the door open and drops you right back into a moment. The effect can be comforting, bittersweet, or even overwhelming. And so, hidden in the air you breathe are invisible threads, waiting for the right scent to pull you back through time. The chemistry of remembering, neurotransmitters at work. Every memory is written not only in electrical sparks, but also in delicate washes of chemistry. When you notice something, your brain releases neurotransmitters, tiny messengers that carry the signal across the gaps between neurons. Dopamine says, "This feels good, keep it." Norepinephrine whispers, "This matters, remember it." And glutamate, the most common messenger, strengthens the very pathways that hold the memory together. These chemicals don't just make recall possible, they decide which moments earn a place in the mind's library. That's why an exciting or emotional moment sticks more than a dull one. The brain, ever efficient, saves its chemical ink for the pages worth keeping. If you've ever had a flash of memory during exercise or after laughter, you felt this chemistry in motion. Your body was helping your brain write in bold strokes. Even food can influence this. A healthy meal, a rush of sugar, a sip of coffee, all subtly changing how your neurons talk to each other. But like all delicate processes, balance matters. Too little of these chemicals, and memories fade quickly. Too much, and the brain can over-record, making moments too intense to forget. Memory's chemistry is a recipe that must be measured just right. It's a reminder that remembering isn't a simple yes or no. It's a living conversation between electricity, chemistry, and the meaning we give to what we see. Sleep's mysterious role in memory storage. While you sleep, your brain is far from idle. It is quietly sorting through the day, deciding what to keep and what to let dissolve. This is why some problems seem clearer after a good night's rest, and why a tired mind struggles to remember even simple things. During deep sleep, the hippocampus replays the patterns of the day's events, as if rehearsing them for long-term storage. In REM sleep, where dreams bloom, the brain begins weaving those rehearsed memories into broader networks, sometimes mixing them with older ones in strange, unexpected ways. This nightly work is why naps can sharpen recall, and why missing sleep makes the mind feel scattered. Without this housekeeping, your mental library grows messy, its shelves cluttered and disorganized. Sometimes a dream will carry the trace of a real moment, a half-remembered conversation, a distant sound from childhood, because your brain was moving it from one place to another, letting it brush past your awareness. It's almost as though memory keeps its most important meetings when you're not there to interrupt. The slow weaving of short-term into long-term memory. Short-term memory is like a sketch pad. It holds moments for a little while, just enough for you to use them. Long-term memory is the vault, steady, built to last. But the path from sketchpad to vault is slow, deliberate. Your brain begins by encoding the moment, breaking it down into sensory fragments and meaning. Then through repetition or emotional weight, it strengthens the neural pathways that hold it. This strengthening, called consolidation, is the quiet weaving process that happens over hours, days, even years. Some memories never make the journey. They fade before the weaving begins, because the brain decided they weren't worth the effort. Others survive only partially, a picture without the sound, a feeling without the details. This slow weaving is why you might clearly remember the feeling of your first day at school, but not the exact clothes you wore. Emotional threads are easier to weave than neutral ones. Every long-term memory you have is the survivor of countless moments that never made it past the sketchpad. How repetition carves deep neural paths. If you walk the same trail through a forest every day, the path becomes easier to follow. The same is true in your brain. Every time you recall or practice something, you strengthen the neural pathways that store it. This is why skills, from playing piano to recalling a phone number, become second nature with repetition. Repetition works best when spaced over time. The brain prefers repeated visits to a memory with breaks in between, rather than cramming all at once. Each revisit is like packing more earth on the trail, making it clearer and harder to erase. This is also why old songs or poems learned in childhood can surface effortlessly decades later. Their paths were carved deep by many early footsteps. But repetition can also trap us. A harmful thought, rehearsed often enough, becomes easier for the brain to access. The same mechanism that strengthens a language lesson can also strengthen worry. Every path you walk in the mind is a choice, and the more you walk it, the easier it is to find again. The fragile nature of first impressions. First impressions are powerful, but also fragile. When you meet someone new, your brain takes a rapid snapshot. Their voice, their face, their posture, even the scent of the room. This first record can set the tone for how you see them in the future. Yet this memory is vulnerable. Over time, new experiences with that person can overwrite parts of the first impression, blending it with later encounters. Sometimes the original image fades completely, replaced by a more nuanced picture. But in some cases, the first impression refuses to change, even in the face of new evidence. This can be a blessing, as when a warm first meeting carries a relationship through difficult times, or it can be a curse, holding on to a false judgment that colours every future interaction. First impressions are shaped not only by what we see, but by what we expect to see. The mind filters the moment through its existing patterns, making memory as much about the past as it is about the present. They remind us that every beginning is also a question, and sometimes the answer changes with time. Why emotional moments refuse to fade. When a moment is wrapped in strong emotion, it settles into the mind differently. The heart races, the senses sharpen, and the brain floods with chemicals that mark the event as important. This is why you remember where you were during a life-changing announcement, or why a single heartfelt conversation can linger for decades. The amygdala, the brain's emotion center, works closely with the hippocampus during these moments. It doesn't just help you feel, it helps you remember. The sharper the emotion, the deeper the grooves it carves in your memory pathways. Even small emotional surges can make a memory more resilient. A sudden laugh during a routine day, a moment of kindness from a stranger. These carry a certain glow in the mind, outlasting countless ordinary minutes. But this power comes with a shadow. Just as joy and wonder etch themselves deeply, so can fear or loss. And because the brain is built to protect, it often remembers the painful moments first, so it can avoid them in the future. Emotional memories are like stones in a river. The water of time flows past them, but they remain anchored, shaping the current long after the moment is gone. The amygdala's hand in strengthening certain memories. The amygdala is small, almond-shaped and fiercely influential. When a moment carries emotional weight, it signals the hippocampus to hold onto it tighter, as though saying, "Don't let this slip away." This teamwork is what makes emotional learning so powerful, and sometimes so stubborn. For example, if you burn your hand on a stove once, the amygdala ensures you don't forget that lesson. It pairs the sensation with a clear emotional marker: danger, caution, alertness. So the memory stands out against the background noise of life. The amygdala doesn't only guard against danger, it also amplifies moments of joy, awe, and love. This is why weddings, births, and reunions often feel crystal clear even years later. They were marked, not just stored. Interestingly, in moments of extreme stress, the amygdala can overactivate, creating memories that feel too sharp, replaying again and again. This can protect, but also overwhelm. Balance is essential, and the brain works constantly to keep it. In the quiet language of neurons, the amygdala is the voice that says, "This matters more than the rest," and your brain listens. How music etches itself into our minds. Music seems to have a direct key to memory. A melody can pull you back to a moment more vividly than a photograph. The rhythm, the tone, even the imperfections of a song can become tied to a time and place in your life. Neuroscientists believe music engages multiple areas of the brain at once: sound processing, language, emotion, movement, weaving the memory into a thick, unbreakable braid. This is why songs you learned as a child return effortlessly decades later. Music doesn't just recall memories, it reawakens them. Hearing a tune from your teenage years can bring back not just the lyrics, but the room you were in, the friends you had, the way you felt that day. It's also why people with memory loss can sometimes still sing along to old songs. The music is stored along different neural pathways than words or facts. Every song you love carries a hidden archive, and every time it plays, the door opens again. The strange link between movement and recall. Your body remembers alongside your mind. Certain actions, tying a shoelace, riding a bike, typing on a keyboard, are stored as procedural memories, deeply rooted in the brain's motor systems. These memories are so ingrained that you can perform them without conscious thought. Movement can also trigger recall of unrelated memories. Walking through a familiar neighborhood can unlock forgotten conversations. Practicing an old dance can bring back the faces you danced with years ago. This happens because movement reactivates the brain's sensory map, the same one that held the original experience. The rhythm of your steps, the sway of your arms, the subtle balance of muscles, all act as cues for memory retrieval. Even small gestures matter. The way you hold a pen might bring back a memory of a school exam. The act of kneading dough might carry you back to a family kitchen. In this way, the body is not just a vessel for memory, it is one of its most loyal storytellers. Why faces are easier to remember than names. Our brains are wired to recognize faces. Long before reading and writing existed, survival depended on knowing friend from foe at a glance. This ancient need has given the visual recognition system extraordinary power. Faces are stored in the fusiform face area, a specialized part of the brain devoted almost entirely to processing them. It can remember the subtle curve of a smile or the unique tilt of someone's eyebrows with remarkable precision. Names, on the other hand, are abstract symbols. They don't carry the same evolutionary urgency. This is why you might instantly recall someone's face but find yourself struggling for their name. Yet, once a name is tied to a vivid image or story, it becomes easier to recall. The brain loves linking the abstract to the concrete, and a name without a face, or a face without a story, is harder to keep. Every face you remember is like a door you can open, but without the name, it sometimes feels like you've misplaced the key. How childhood memories change over time. Childhood memories often feel like they belong to another lifetime, soft, glowing, and sometimes oddly incomplete. In the early years, the brain is still developing the structures needed for long-term memory, so what we recall is often patchy. A mix of actual moments, family stories, and even photographs we've seen again and again. Over time, these memories can shift in subtle ways. Details fade, emotions change, and the mind quietly edits the narrative. Sometimes we add pieces that were never there, borrowed from others' accounts. Other times, we lose small truths without even realizing it. What makes childhood memories so enduring is not their accuracy, but their emotional core. We tend to hold on to how we felt, even if the facts grow hazy. The scent of crayons, the echo of a playground, the warmth of a bedtime story. These anchor points survive even as faces and places change. It's almost as though the mind keeps the essence of those years and lets the edges blur, like an old painting whose colours have softened with time. Our earliest memories are more than records. They are touchstones that quietly shape how we see the world, the fading edges of our earliest recollections. Most people cannot recall events from before the age of 3 or 4, a phenomenon known as childhood amnesia. This isn't because those years were empty, but because the brain's memory systems were not yet fully equipped to preserve them. The hippocampus was still wiring itself, learning how to store complex experiences. Even among the memories that survive from early childhood, the edges tend to fade first. You might remember playing with a toy, but not the room you were in, or recall a family trip without remembering how you got there. Sometimes these memories don't disappear entirely. They simply sink deeper, becoming harder to reach. Certain triggers, like a specific smell or an old photograph, can momentarily lift them back to the surface, but they rarely return unchanged. Every retrieval reshapes them, adding modern understanding to old impressions. What was once a confusing moment can gain clarity, and what once felt magical can take on a bittersweet hue. The earliest memories we hold are like fragile artifacts, and with each passing year, they become more about the meaning they carry than the moment itself. Why some memories sharpen as others blur? Not all memories fade at the same pace. Some remain sharp, detailed, and vivid even decades later, while others lose their form quickly. The difference often lies in emotional significance, repetition, and the strength of the original sensory experience. A vivid memory might be revisited often, consciously or unconsciously, strengthening its neural pathways. Or it might be tied to a strong emotional moment that the brain refuses to let go of. Meanwhile, less significant events, no matter how recent, may blur quickly. It's also about context. A moment connected to many other memories has more hooks in the brain, making it easier to recall. Isolated events without connections are easier to lose. Interestingly, some memories sharpen after others fade, as if the brain is curating a personal highlight reel. The surrounding details may vanish, but the core moment stands out against the emptiness left behind. This selectiveness is part of what makes memory so human. It's not a perfect record, but a living portrait that changes with time. How the brain edits memories without asking. Every time you remember something, you're not simply playing it back, you're rewriting it. The act of recall is also an act of reconstruction. Neurons fire, pathways reactivate, and the brain fills in gaps with its best guesses. These edits are often so subtle you'd never notice. A different shirt colour, a slightly altered sequence of events, a face that wasn't actually there. And once updated, the new version replaces the old one in storage. This means a memory you've revisited many times might actually be less accurate than one you've barely thought about. Repetition strengthens it, but also gives it more opportunities to be altered. External suggestions can also slip into a memory's fabric. Hearing someone else describe an event can cause your brain to weave their details into your own recollection. The result is that memory is not a fixed photograph, but a living, breathing canvas. One you're painting over, stroke by stroke, every time you look at it. The ghost of forgotten details that still influence us. Even when a memory fades beyond conscious reach, it doesn't disappear completely. The traces remain, hidden in the subconscious, quietly shaping thoughts, choices, and feelings. You might forget an encounter, yet still feel a warmth or a hesitation towards someone because of it. This is because the brain stores not just the facts of a moment, but the emotional and sensory imprints. These imprints can influence our decisions without us ever recalling their source. It's why certain places feel instantly comforting, or why you have an unexplained aversion to a smell or sound. Somewhere, in the quiet backrooms of the mind, a forgotten moment still breathes. Sometimes these ghosts reappear, in a dream, in a sudden flash of recognition, reminding you that the past is never entirely gone. More often, they remain invisible, guiding you silently. Memory, it turns out, is not just what we can recall. It is everything we carry, seen and unseen. The curious case of déjà vu. Déjà vu slips into the mind like a ghost, that odd, almost unsettling feeling that you've been here before, standing in this exact spot, hearing these exact words, watching events unfold as if on repeat. It's fleeting, yet strangely convincing. Scientists believe it happens when the brain's memory system misfires. The sensation of familiarity kicks in before the conscious recognition of the moment does. It's as though your brain briefly mistakes the present for the past. A tiny glitch in timing between the memory and perception circuits creates the illusion that you're reliving something. For most people, it lasts only seconds, but in that instant, the world feels suspended, the moment charged with mystery. Déjà vu might also occur when the current scene subtly resembles something stored deep in your memory, a layout, a smell, a pattern of light, triggering a whisper of recognition without you realizing the source. For some, it's unsettling. For others, oddly comforting. Either way, it's a reminder that the brain is not a perfect storyteller. Sometimes it blends timelines, bending the edges between what is and what was. And when it passes, it leaves behind a peculiar aftertaste. Part wonder, part question. Why we sometimes recall things that never happened. Our minds are masterful storytellers, but not always honest ones. Sometimes we carry vivid memories that, on closer examination, never actually happened. These false memories can be as detailed as real ones, complete with emotions, smells, and textures. They can form when the brain fills in gaps with plausible details, or when suggestion from others weaves new threads into old recollections. Over time, the imagined scene becomes indistinguishable from reality. Group storytelling often fuels this. You hear a friend describe an event in which you weren't present, but the telling is so vivid that your mind begins to place you in the scene. The more you revisit it, the more it feels like your own. Even photographs can play tricks. A picture you've seen many times may convince you that you remember the moment it was taken, even if you were never there. It's humbling to realize that memory is not just a record, but a creative act, capable of invention as easily as preservation. How imagination and memory share the same space. Imagination and memory live in neighboring rooms of the mind. When you recall a past event, your brain reassembles sensory fragments to recreate it. When you imagine something new, it uses many of the same neural pathways. This overlap is why it can be hard to separate what you remember from what you imagine. The brain's visual and emotional centers fire in similar patterns, whether the moment is drawn from life or conjured from creativity. This is also why visualizing a skill can improve performance almost as much as physically practicing it. The brain treats the imagined repetition much like the real one. But there's a catch. Because memory and imagination share resources, details can slip from one to the other. A scene you daydreamed might later feel like something you actually experienced. It's a quiet blending, a reminder that the mind's truth is often more about coherence than accuracy. The role of storytelling in shaping the past. Every time we tell a story about our past, we're not just sharing it, we're shaping it. The details we choose to include or leave out, the emotions we highlight, the meaning we attach, all of these subtly alter the memory itself. A story told often becomes polished, streamlined. Some edges are softened, some colors deepened. Eventually, the story can become the memory, replacing the raw, unfiltered original. Storytelling also binds memory to emotion. A moment that might have felt ordinary at the time can grow in significance as it's retold, because each telling recharges its emotional charge. This is why family histories passed down through generations can become richer, more vivid, and sometimes more myth than fact. The story becomes a living thing, growing with each retelling. In the end, we don't just remember life, we narrate it, and in doing so, we change it. How language changes what we remember. The words we use to describe a memory can reshape it. If you label a moment as terrifying, your brain will strengthen its association with fear. If you describe it as exciting, the emotional tone shifts entirely. Language acts like a lens, colouring the scene each time you recall it. This is why eyewitness accounts can differ so dramatically. A single adjective or phrase can lead the mind down a completely different interpretive path. Even the language we speak influences memory. Cultures with more words for certain colours, emotions, or sensations can recall those details more precisely. If a concept doesn't exist in your vocabulary, you may notice it less, remember it less. Language can also sharpen a memory by organising it, turning a swirl of impressions into a clear narrative. But in doing so, it may also erase the parts that don't fit the story. In this way, words don't just describe our memories, they sculpt them. The memory trap of repeated photographs. Photographs can preserve a moment, but they can also overwrite it. The more you look at a photo, the more your memory of that day starts to match the image, even if the image leaves things out. Over time, you may recall the photograph more vividly than the actual experience. This is why certain trips or events feel inseparable from their pictures. The mind leans on the visual cue, letting the other senses fade. The sound of voices, the air temperature, the feeling in your chest. They slowly dissolve as the image becomes the anchor. Repeated viewing can also introduce false details. You might remember something just outside the frame because your mind filled in the gap with imagination or other stories from that day. This doesn't make the memory false, just different. It's a blending of lived experience and visual record, a shared creation between reality and the captured moment. In this way, photos are both guardians and sculptors of memory, preserving and reshaping at the same time. Why smell and taste bypass conscious thought? Smell and taste are unique among the senses. They have a direct pathway to the brain's emotional and memory centers, skipping the usual processing steps. This shortcut means they can trigger vivid memories before you even realize what's happening. A single whiff of fresh bread might pull you into your grandmother's kitchen. The tang of salt water on your tongue can take you instantly to a childhood beach. These moments arrive complete, with sights, sounds, and emotions bundled inside. Because they bypass the slower, conscious routes, smells and tastes can feel more immersive than memories triggered by sight or sound. They don't ask permission, they simply appear. This is why scents are often used in therapy for memory retrieval, especially for those with cognitive decline. A familiar smell can light up dormant pathways, unlocking pieces of the past. It's a reminder that some of the strongest keys to memory are carried not in your mind, but in the air and on your tongue. How place becomes a mental trigger. The brain ties memories tightly to location. A place you've visited often becomes a backdrop for layers of experiences, each visit adding another coat of paint to the canvas. Returning there can cause old memories to surface unexpectedly. This is why walking into your old school can flood you with memories of classmates, teachers, even the way the halls smelled. The environment itself acts as a cue, activating the web of associations linked to it. Sometimes even small similarities in a new place, lighting, the sound of a door closing, can echo an old location and stir related memories. These location-based cues are powerful because they tap into the brain's spatial mapping system, which is deeply intertwined with memory. The hippocampus, our memory architect, is also the brain's map maker. In a way, your mind is a landscape dotted with landmarks, and each one is a doorway to the past. The brain's map of familiar routes. Our minds hold detailed maps of places we know well. The walk from home to the store, the turns inside a favourite park, the layout of a familiar building. These spatial memories are stored in a network that helps us navigate the world almost effortlessly. They're so ingrained that you can often walk a route in your mind without moving a step. And sometimes retracing those paths physically can bring back memories tied to them. A conversation that happened on a certain corner, the sound of music from a shop you passed. This mapping is linked to special neurons called place cells, which activate when you're in specific locations. Over time, they form a mental grid that blends space and experience. These mental maps are why you might feel a wave of nostalgia simply by turning down a street you haven't walked in years. The path itself has become part of your personal history. Every familiar route is not just a line on the ground, it's a thread in the fabric of your life. How stress can both sharpen and shatter recall. Stress has a complicated relationship with memory. In small doses, it can heighten focus, increase alertness, and make certain moments stick more vividly. This is the body's survival mechanism, making sure we remember situations that matter for safety or success. But prolonged or intense stress can do the opposite. It floods the brain with stress hormones like cortisol, which can disrupt the hippocampus and weaken the ability to form or retrieve memories. This is why some high-pressure moments are unforgettable, while others vanish into a blur. The line between sharpening and shattering is thin. Even mild stress can influence what we remember. It may cause the mind to focus narrowly on one detail while ignoring others, creating a skewed record of the event. In the end, stress reminds us that memory is not just mental, it's physical, shaped by the body's state at the moment the memory was made. Why exam cramming fades so quickly. Cramming floods the mind with information in a short burst, but it rarely gives the brain the time it needs to properly store it. Short-term memory acts like a scratch pad. You can pack it full, but without deeper processing, the notes will fade quickly. The hippocampus needs repetition and rest to build strong connections. Cramming often skips the consolidation stage, where new material is linked to existing knowledge. Without these links, the information floats without anchors, making it harder to retrieve later. Stress can make this worse. The pressure of cramming often triggers mild anxiety, which narrows focus to the moment rather than the long-term storage of details. That's why a week after the test, much of what was learned seems to vanish. It was never truly woven into the brain's network. The memories were temporary, serving only the immediate need. For lasting recall, the brain prefers steady, spaced exposure, the slow, quiet planting of seeds rather than a hurried scattering. The power of spaced repetition. Spaced repetition is the mind's natural rhythm for learning. Instead of forcing information in all at once, you revisit it at gradually increasing intervals. Each review strengthens the neural pathways, making the memory more resilient to fading. This technique works because the brain responds to a bit of forgetting. When you struggle slightly to recall something, the effort reactivates and reinforces the connections, like adding another layer of stone to a wall. Language learners, musicians, and memory champions all rely on this principle. A little today, a little tomorrow, then again in a week, the timing is as important as the content. The beauty of spaced repetition is that it feels light. You're never overwhelmed, yet the results accumulate powerfully over time. A few minutes of review can anchor a memory for years. It's proof that the mind prefers a gentle drip of water to a flood when it comes to lasting knowledge. How forgetting can actually protect the mind. Forgetting often feels like a flaw, but it is also a form of protection. The brain cannot and should not keep everything. Forgetting clears away clutter, making space for what matters and reducing the mental noise that could overwhelm decision-making. It can also soften the sting of painful events. Over time, the sharp edges of loss or embarrassment can dull, allowing us to carry the lessons without the full weight of the hurt. Forgetting irrelevant details keeps us adaptable. If you remembered every outdated fact or every minor change, your mind would be slower to adjust to new information. In this way, forgetting is not the enemy of memory. It's a quiet partner, pruning the mental gardens so new growth can thrive. Sometimes, the things we lose from memory are what allow us to keep moving forward. The art of memory palaces. A memory palace is an ancient technique that uses place as a framework for recall. You imagine a familiar building, your home, a school, a market, and mentally place the information you want to remember in different rooms or spots. Later, by walking through the palace in your mind, you can retrieve each item exactly where you left it. This works because our brains are exceptional at remembering locations, and tying abstract facts to spatial images makes them easier to recall. Memory champions can recite hundreds of numbers or names using this method, but it works just as well for grocery lists or speeches. The richer the imagery, the stronger the recall. Adding sounds, textures, and even imaginary scents to your palace can make it feel more real, anchoring the information more deeply. It's a reminder that memory is as much about creativity as it is about discipline. How visualization strengthens retention. Visualization turns information into imagery the brain can hold on to. When you create a mental picture of a concept, you give it form, color, and shape, making it easier for the mind to find later. Abstract ideas become concrete landscapes. This works because the brain evolved to store visual scenes efficiently. Linking a fact to an image activates multiple areas: vision, emotion, even movement if you picture yourself interacting with the image. Athletes often visualize their performance before competition, rehearsing each motion in the mind. Students can do the same with a process, an argument, or a timeline, turning it into a mental movie. The stronger and more unusual the image, the better it sticks. A giant red elephant balancing on a clock is far easier to remember than 4 p.m. Our minds favor the vivid over the ordinary. In this way, visualization becomes a bridge between knowledge and memory, turning fleeting thoughts into lasting imprints. Why we recall learning moments more than facts. Facts alone are fragile, but when they're tied to a moment of discovery, they tend to stay. It's not the date you remember. It's the way the teacher's voice cracked when explaining it, the sunlight on the desk, the feeling of finally understanding. Moments wrap facts in texture, making them easier for the brain to revisit. The hippocampus stores both the factual content and the context around it, and that context often acts as the stronger hook. Without it, a fact can float away. With it, it feels rooted in place and time. This is why stories are such effective teachers. They give facts a home, a setting, and a reason to matter. You might forget the statistics, but you'll remember the moment they were brought to life. Even in casual learning, a tip from a friend, a recipe from a neighbor, the memory sticks better if it's linked to a warm interaction or a surprise insight. We are not just collectors of facts. We are gatherers of moments that make those facts worth keeping. The role of curiosity in cementing memories. Curiosity is like a spotlight in the mind. It directs attention, fuels focus, and makes the brain more receptive to storing what it finds. When we genuinely want to know something, the memory pathways are primed for retention. Neuroscience shows that curiosity triggers dopamine release, the same chemical involved in pleasure and reward. This not only makes learning enjoyable, it marks the memory as important, increasing the odds it will last. Think of the times you went down a rabbit hole on a subject you cared about. Hours could pass without you noticing, and days later you could still recall the details vividly. Curiosity transforms learning from a task into a journey. The brain treats discoveries made through genuine interest like treasures, locking them away with extra care. In this way, curiosity doesn't just lead you to new knowledge, it makes that knowledge yours. How novelty wakes up the brain. The brain is a seeker of patterns, but it loves a good surprise. Novelty jolts it out of routine, causing a surge of activity in areas linked to attention and memory. A new experience forces the brain to focus, sharpening the imprint of the moment. This is why the first day in a new city can feel unforgettable, while a week of familiar commutes blurs together. Novelty commands attention, and attention is the gateway to memory. Even small changes can spark this effect. Rearranging furniture, taking a new route to work, trying an unfamiliar flavour. Each fresh detail wakes the brain just enough to record the moment more vividly. Novelty also encourages the release of dopamine, adding a layer of motivation and emotional colour to the memory. The mind marks it as a first, something worth revisiting. Every new experience is like a bright flag on the map of your life. Why strong emotions make indelible marks. Strong emotions act like a highlighter on the page of memory. Joy, grief, fear, wonder. These states flood the brain with chemical signals that tell it, pay attention, this matters. The result is a deeper, more durable imprint. The amygdala's involvement ensures that the emotional tone is preserved alongside the factual content. You don't just remember what happened, you remember how it felt. This is why emotional highs and lows often become the clearest chapters in our mental story. Even decades later, they retain a sharpness that ordinary days lack. But intensity comes with complexity. Sometimes the emotional charge can distort the facts, amplifying certain details while muting others. The memory remains vivid, but it may not be exact. Still, these moments shape the narrative of our lives, becoming the anchors we measure other experiences against. The thin line between trauma and resilience in memory. Traumatic memories and resilient ones are both forged in the furnace of strong emotion, but they leave different legacies. Trauma can lock a memory in place, unchanging and intrusive, replaying without invitation. Resilience, on the other hand, often reshapes the memory, softening it without erasing its lessons. The difference often lies in what happens after the event. Support, reflection, and meaning-making can transform a painful moment into a source of strength, altering how the brain stores and recalls it. In both cases, the original emotional impact is undeniable, but resilience allows the memory to become a stepping stone rather than a trap. Neuroscience shows that revisiting a difficult memory in safe, supportive contexts can help rewire its emotional charge, allowing the hippocampus to store it alongside a broader context of growth. It's a testament to the brain's adaptability and to the human capacity for healing through memory itself. How culture shapes collective memory. Memory is not only personal, it's cultural. The events, stories, and symbols a society values are passed down and reinforced, shaping how its people remember their shared past. These cultural memories become part of identity, giving individuals a sense of belonging and continuity. Festivals, national holidays, and public monuments act as anchors, keeping certain memories alive across generations. The repetition of these shared moments ensures they remain vivid, even for those who never lived through the original events. Culture can also influence what is remembered and how. Some details are celebrated, others are softened or erased, depending on the narrative a society chooses to tell. This collective shaping can create unity, but it can also leave blind spots. places where history has been edited to fit a more comfortable or inspiring version of events. In this way, memory is not only stored in minds, but in the traditions, language, and symbols that a culture preserves. The way shared stories bind communities. When people share stories, they share more than words, they share identity. A community's stories serve as a thread weaving individual memories into a collective fabric. These narratives become a common reference point, binding people together. Hearing the same story told by multiple voices strengthens its place in memory. The repetition ensures that even those who weren't present feel as if they were, and the story becomes part of their personal history too. This is why family anecdotes, local legends, and community milestones remain so strong. They are not just heard, they are lived through the act of sharing. The more a story is retold, the more it shifts to reflect the values of the group, making it both a record and a mirror of the community's character. In this way, shared stories are both the glue and the guide of human connection. How ritual keeps the past alive. Rituals, whether daily routines or annual ceremonies, act like bookmarks in time. They give structure to memory, ensuring certain moments are revisited again and again. Lighting a candle, saying a prayer, gathering for a meal, these acts hold layers of meaning built over years. The repetition of ritual doesn't just keep memories alive, it deepens them. Each performance adds a new layer, blending past experiences with the present moment. Even small personal rituals, morning coffee in the same chair, walking a familiar path, can carry echoes of earlier days, quietly preserving their imprint. Cultural and religious rituals, passed from generation to generation, allow entire communities to carry their history forward without losing its essence. Through ritual, memory becomes not just something we have, but something we do. Why some songs define entire generations. Music can be more than personal. It can become a time capsule for an entire generation. A single song can capture the mood, hopes, and struggles of a moment in history, and hearing it decades later can awaken those feelings in everyone who lived through it. Generational songs are often tied to major cultural or political events, and because they're shared so widely, they become part of the collective soundtrack of life. When people gather and sing them, they're not just enjoying music, they're reaffirming a shared identity and reliving a piece of their collective past. Even those born later can absorb the memory through exposure, carrying echoes of a time they never personally experienced. In this way, certain songs don't just belong to individuals, they belong to history itself. The persistence of folklore in the mind. Folklore survives because it lives where memory is strongest, in stories that engage emotion, imagination, and repetition. Myths, legends, and folk tales are often retold with small variations, which only deepen their place in memory. These tales carry cultural lessons, moral warnings, and shared humour, ensuring they remain relevant even as the world changes around them. Because folklore is often passed down orally, it bypasses the need for written records, relying instead on the human gift for storytelling. This keeps it flexible, allowing each generation to shape it slightly while preserving its core. Even in the digital age, where information moves faster than ever, folklore endures, sometimes transformed into memes, songs, or urban legends, but still carrying that familiar structure of meaning. In this way, folklore becomes a bridge between the distant past and the present moment, keeping old voices alive in new forms. How handwriting locks in learning. There's something about the slow, deliberate act of handwriting that seems to carve knowledge deeper into the mind. Unlike typing, which can feel mechanical and detached, writing by hand engages fine motor skills, visual processing, and spatial awareness all at once. Each letter, each curve, becomes a small movement your brain remembers alongside the words themselves. When you write, you process the information differently. You distill it, rephrase it, and make choices about what to put on the page. This active engagement strengthens the neural connections that store the memory. Studies have shown that people who take handwritten notes recall information better than those who type, even if they write less overall. The slowness forces you to listen, think, and synthesize. Even doodles in the margins can help. These small sketches, shapes, and symbols act as visual anchors, pulling the memory back when you see them again. In an age of screens, handwriting remains a quiet, tactile way to help the brain remember. Why teaching something helps you remember it. Explaining an idea to someone else is like putting your memory through a workout. When you teach, you're forced to recall the information, organize it, and present it clearly, all of which strengthen the pathways that hold the knowledge. This retrieval practice reveals any gaps in your understanding, making it easier to reinforce weak points. The act of simplifying for someone else also helps you store a cleaner, more accessible version of the information. Teaching isn't only about speaking. It can be writing a guide, demonstrating a process, or even answering a curious question. Each method asks your brain to revisit the material from different angles, which deepens the imprint. That's why you might remember a topic you once tutored far better than one you only studied for yourself. In teaching, you rehearse it many times, and each rehearsal plants the roots deeper. It's almost as if teaching is the final stage of learning, the point where the knowledge truly becomes your own. The brain's love for patterns and sequences. Our brains are natural pattern seekers. From constellations in the night sky to the rhythm of footsteps, we are wired to notice repetition and order. Patterns give structure to memory, making information easier to store and retrieve. This is why rhymes, acronyms, and number sequences are easier to recall than random bits of data. They create a framework, a mental scaffolding, for the mind to hang details on. Even stories follow this principle. A clear beginning, middle, and end form a sequence that guides recall. Break the sequence, and the memory becomes harder to grasp. Patterns also help with anticipation. When your brain learns a sequence, it starts predicting what comes next, and that predictive engagement strengthens the memory further. From music to mathematics, patterns are the language the brain loves to speak. How mistakes carve deeper lessons than success. Success feels good, but mistakes often leave the deeper mark. This is because errors trigger stronger emotional and cognitive reactions. The brain pays attention to them in order to avoid repeating them. When you make a mistake, your mind replays the event, analyzing what went wrong. This repetition and problem-solving process strengthens the memory far more than a smooth, unchallenged success. The discomfort of failure also engages emotional memory systems, making the lesson harder to forget. It's why a misstep in cooking or a missed turn while driving sticks with you long after the perfect attempts fade. Of course, the power lies in reflection. Mistakes only teach when you look closely at them. Without that, they risk becoming just repeated errors. In a way, mistakes are the brain's way of leaving bold notes in the margins of your life story, the long echo of childhood learning. The things we learn in childhood often outlast what we acquire later in life. The songs, languages, and skills picked up early seem to cling with unusual tenacity. One reason is that the young brain is in a state of heightened plasticity. It forms and strengthens connections more rapidly, embedding lessons deeply. Repetition during those years also helps, as children tend to revisit the same games, songs, and phrases again and again. Childhood learning is often wrapped in play and emotion, which further cements it. The joy of discovery, the comfort of routine, the encouragement from caregivers, These are powerful memory enhancers. Even decades later, a childhood tune or phrase can rise effortlessly to the surface, as fresh as the day it was learned. The neural pathways built back then are well-traveled roads. These echoes remind us that early experiences don't just shape who we are, they shape what we will always remember. Why some people seem to remember everything. There are rare individuals whose memories seem limitless, able to recall the weather, the clothes they wore, and the exact words spoken on any given day of their lives. This condition, called highly superior autobiographical memory, HSAM, is as fascinating as it is mysterious. Their brains appear to have enhanced connections between areas involved in memory storage and emotional processing. This heightened link means their recall is not just factual, but also deeply sensory and emotional. While it might sound like a gift, it comes with challenges. Painful memories remain as vivid as joyful ones, offering no relief from the passage of time. Even for those without HSAM, we all have certain areas of memory where we excel, details or experiences we recall effortlessly, often tied to passion, repetition, or emotion. It's a reminder that memory is as individual as a fingerprint, shaped by biology, experience, and meaning. The mystery of photographic memory. Photographic memory is a term often used to describe perfect recall of images, but true examples are extremely rare and may not work quite like the name suggests. In most cases, what's called photographic memory is actually a highly developed visual memory, sharpened through focus and practice. Some people can hold an image in mind for a short period with incredible clarity, noticing details others might overlook. This skill, called eidetic imagery, is more common in children and tends to fade with age. Photographic memory in the mythical sense, the ability to instantly memorize a page forever, is largely unsupported by science. However, through training, people can learn to remember with extraordinary accuracy. Whether innate or developed, this kind of memory relies on attention, visual detail, and the brain's ability to connect images to meaning. It shows that the line between gift and skill is often thinner than we think. How brain injuries reveal hidden pathways. When injury disrupts one memory pathway, others sometimes rise to fill the gap. People recovering from brain trauma often find unexpected abilities, like recalling certain songs but not names, or navigating familiar routes without being able to describe them. These differences reveal that memory is not stored in one place but spread across a network. Damage to one part may erase certain types of recall while leaving others untouched. Some individuals even develop compensatory strategies, using smells, sounds, or rhythms to retrieve memories that words alone can't access. In this way, brain injuries become a window into the complexity of how we remember, showing the layered nature of recall and the brain's ability to adapt. It's a reminder that memory is both fragile and remarkably resilient. The resilience of memory after damage. Even after injury, the brain can sometimes rebuild, forming new connections to recover lost memories or create fresh ways of storing information. This process, called neuroplasticity, is one of the brain's most hopeful features. Therapies that engage multiple senses, sight, sound, touch, can help strengthen alternate pathways, allowing memories to be retrieved from different angles. In some cases, people don't recover the original memory, but form a new one that feels equally real, letting them function and connect again. The journey can be slow, but it shows how memory is not just a static record. It is a living process, capable of rewiring itself when needed. Even in loss, there is often a path toward rebuilding. Why we recall events differently over years. Time doesn't just fade memories, it reshapes them. A moment you experienced years ago may now feel warmer, darker, or entirely different than when it happened. This shift occurs because each time you recall the memory, you overlay it with your current perspective. New emotions, new knowledge, and even new biases can tint the recollection. Over decades, the same event may transform from painful to precious, or from thrilling to bittersweet. It's not that the facts change, but the meaning does. And meaning is what the brain tends to hold on to most tightly. This is why two people who lived the same moment may remember it in very different ways years later. Memory is part fact, part interpretation, and part ongoing story. In the end, the past we carry is never frozen. It evolves with us, becoming a reflection of who we are today. How nostalgia softens sharp edges of the past. Nostalgia works like a gentle filter over memory. Over time, the sharp lines of pain or disappointment blur, and the warm tones grow stronger. We remember the laughter at the dinner table more than the arguments, the excitement of a journey more than the delays. This softening happens because the brain tends to preserve what's emotionally comforting and let the harsher parts fade. It's not erasing the truth. It's simply balancing it in a way that makes the memory easier to carry. Nostalgia can be sparked by a scent, a song, or a place, and when it arrives, it often brings a bittersweet ache, joy wrapped in longing. This mix of emotions deepens the imprint even further. The gentle glow of nostalgia can be a refuge during hard times, reminding us of the beauty woven into our lives, even if it wasn't perfect. In this way, the past becomes not just a record of events, but a source of quiet comfort, the link between memory and identity. Our memories are the threads that weave our sense of self. Without them, the story of who we are would have no chapters, no through line connecting past to present. Every choice, every belief, every habit is influenced by experiences we remember, and even by those we've forgotten consciously but still carry in our subconscious. They shape our values, our preferences, and our understanding of the world. When memory is lost, as in certain illnesses, identity can begin to fray. Without the anchor of personal history, the present can feel unmoored. Yet even then, pieces remain. The way a person reacts to a song they loved, or the comfort they find in familiar routines. This intimate bond between memory and identity reminds us that remembering is not just recalling events, it's holding on to the story of us. How losing memories changes the self. When significant memories fade, it can feel as if part of the self is slipping away. The events we can no longer recall may take with them certain perspectives, feelings, and even relationships. Yet the loss also reveals something surprising, that identity is more flexible than we imagine. People adapt, reshaping their sense of self around the memories that remain and around the new ones they continue to create. In some cases, losing old memories can lead to a kind of rebirth, a chance to experience people and places without the weight of past associations. But it can also bring grief for what's gone. Loved ones often act as memory keepers in these moments, helping to rebuild a sense of continuity. Stories, photographs, and shared experiences can act as borrowed memories, keeping the self connected to its roots. It's a tender reminder that who we are is not fixed. It is an evolving conversation between past and present, the science of preserving recall in old age. Memory naturally changes as we age, but there are ways to protect and even strengthen it. Physical exercise boosts blood flow to the brain, while mentally challenging activities, puzzles, reading, learning new skills, keep neural pathways active. Social connection is equally important. Conversations, shared activities, and laughter stimulate brain regions tied to memory and emotional health. Even small daily interactions can help preserve recall. Diet plays a role too. Foods rich in antioxidants, omega-3 fatty acids, and vitamins support brain health. Sleep remains a cornerstone, giving the mind the rest it needs to store and retrieve information. While no one can stop time, these habits create an environment where memories can thrive longer, staying sharper and richer into later years. It's about giving the brain the care and stimulation it needs to keep telling the story for as long as possible. The ongoing conversation between past and present in the mind. Memory is not a closed book on a shelf. It's a living dialogue between who we were and who we are now. Every new experience changes how we interpret the past, and every past experience influences how we navigate the present. This constant exchange shapes our decisions, our relationships, and our hopes for the future. It means that the past is never truly fixed. It is rewritten in subtle ways each time we remember it. The mind is always negotiating between memory and reality, between holding on and letting go. This is why an old memory can suddenly feel new, and why the meaning of a moment can shift years after it happened. In the end, memory is less about perfect recall and more about connection, the threads linking our life's moments into a coherent, evolving whole. And so, we carry on, walking through time with our minds as both traveller and historian,